Hi, it's Teresa. Well, I recently finished this acrylic painting and I ended up calling it Mystic Forest Path because it does have kind of a mystical, mysterious look to it, right? But the original reason I painted the jackrabbits is because we have them in my neighborhood where I live. And they're so cute and they're so big. They're bigger than my dog. And I really like them. I like animals in general. But after I was finished with the painting, I decided to Google the spiritual meaning of jackrabbits. And the metaphysical qualities of jackrabbits, they're both positive and negative. They're all over the map. So, of course, I'm going to go with the positive meanings of jackrabbits. But what I wanted to show in this painting is the underpainting layers, the shapes, really did start to come through these successive layers. And the shapes that are in those very original layers still come through and helped me to define the shapes that you see now. So I'll explain that as I show the pictures of how the painting progressed. So I started out painting the most distant elements, which is the sky and the clouds. And I roughed in the shapes and colors that I wanted. After that, I wanted to show perspective from the foreground of the forest path going into the distance towards the clouds. So I painted in a triangular shape using dirt colors and forest leaves. After that, I added grass areas and more dirt areas to both sides and blended in some of the colors of the forest path into those grass areas. But you can still see these original shapes in the underpainting, and I will use those later to define rocks and the shape of the grass areas and other elements. And then I wanted to define the forest path a little more, so I added these lighter colors, further blending in the other colors on the forest path. And you can see in the foreground that I added some more darker greens. And again, these will help define the texture of the forest path with rocks and leaves and other shapes. And again, I'm still blending in the colors of the forest path into the brighter colors now that I added for the grassy areas on both sides of the forest path. And these just keep evolving as I paint and move from one area of the painting to other areas. Because as I paint other areas, I might want to lighten or darken some of the colors in the grass and on the forest path compared to the colors that are more in the distance. So then I started refining the sky a little more. I added some darker clouds and I worked on the shape of the clouds more to define them more and added highlights and a couple other shadow areas in the clouds based on the idea that had been in my mind originally. And then the jackrabbits appeared. And I had my own photos of some of the jackrabbits in the grassy fields around my neighborhood. And I Googled some too. And I continued working on the jackrabbits, the details to try to define their shapes. And this jackrabbit in the background was one of the jackrabbits that was in a field around my neighborhood. And then I moved into adding some details to the grassy areas to define them a little better. And you can still see the texture of the underpainting in the forest path. They're starting to look more like rocks and ridges going up into the grassy areas. So that's what I mean. The underpainting in my acrylic paintings really does help to determine different shapes in my paintings, and it just kind of evolves on its own like that. And then I started adding the trees, starting from the furthest ones using lighter blue colors. and then adding different layers of the trees as they moved towards the foreground using darker shades of blue. And they are a little more defined, the ones in the foreground. And fleshing out the leaves on the trees a little more, and more details in the jackrabbits. And then this is one of my favorite parts of the paintings, to paint in details of the really close parts of the foreground. I love painting in these little plants, and these have to be really sharply detailed and crisp so that they do look like they're in the foreground, the closest elements to you, just to give the painting more depth. So I hope you got some good ideas by watching this video. And if you'd like to watch the full painting progression of this painting, here it is now. So thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate the viewer support. Bye-bye.